1440 hours. The KIMS kits are transmitting some 23 hours later, still transmitting data. And we are saying that that data is not acceptable. So we come to the next slide. I'll just run through given the short time I have. When you got that slide, you look, they tell you at 20:45 hours, on 9th August 2022, some 13,731,215 people voted. Polling turnout recorded on 10th August is 14,239,862 ballots. And on the 10th, that is the day after the voting, and we know that it's only elders where elections are taking place. Now, when you analyze that data, you find that 508,647 ballots are added on the 10th. And you saw Land Council Willis show that the audit of the register had almost the same number of ghost voters. So you can see from that data that they present, Mr. Sunguli presents, you are able to isolate 508,647 ghost cast votes, which are more than the difference between the two leading candidates. If you go to the next slide, and if you look at the ballots that are recorded to have received, to have recorded on the next day, you are talking of some 1,665,412 curiously cast votes, which are coming out after the close of voting, and that's after 3 hours after the close of voting. So we take the total tally now, you find that the tally is close to it's about 1.7 million votes. That spike in votes is not possible. That spike in votes is part of the problems we're having, that fellows were having access, the KIMS kits that were still transmitting data from locations that are not clear. Because the KIMS kits that were in polling stations, the voting stopped on 9th. And giving an allowance of 3 hours or 4 hours for people who are still on the queue, you would understand by why a KIMS kit would still be transmitting 23 hours after the close of elections is something that is difficult to comprehend. Also, my members of the Honorable Court, if you look at the Form 34C that has been published and interrogate the data there, if you look at the total of the variables ascribed to each candidate, the amount that you get is 110 votes less than the number that has been printed on that paper. Now, if you look at, that thing was boggling my mind. Initially, I thought it was a simple error of addition. But it has come out it was not a question of 1 + 1 = 3. Because when you look at paragraph 32 of the replying affidavit of Mr. Sunkuli, yes, I'm on, yes, go to the next slide. Next. Yes, sorry, I forgot to, thank you for directing. If you look at paragraph 32 of the replying affidavit of Mr. Sunkuli, the total voter turnout in the table when you subtract from it, as given in the table, the number of rejected votes on Form 34, you get exactly that figure of 14,213,137, which in that replying affidavit they claim was an error of addition. But if you interrogate their raw data, you find that that figure is the valid figure. So the votes attributed to the candidates are fictitious. From paragraph 32 of Mr. Sunkuli's replying affidavit. So when you go on to the next slide. I've reproduced I've tried to factor the figures that Mr. Sunkuli gives, and when you add them, you get the 14,213,137. Yet, when you add the figures attributed to the individual candidates on Form 34C, they come to 14,213,027. That is not an innocent mistake. It is a situation whereby somebody has left a trail that they were working backwards from a certain figure which they had, and they were working backwards, and so they would going to get that. And most important, I would also refer to the affidavit signed by the chairman, filed by the chairman in petition number 5. At paragraph 95 of his replying affidavit, sworn on 26 August 2022, the chairman presents the exact figure of 14,213,137 as the total valid votes cast for all the 4 candidates. So if that is the figure that's coming from the raw data, that's the figure that's carried in the affidavit, then the values attributed to each one of the 4 candidates are fictitious and cannot count. And therefore, that Form 34C is an invalid document. Go to the next slide. Sorry, next. Yes, so in that slide I'm saying, we can only conclude that these figures, which form the content of Form 34C, are cooked. You cannot have both of them in the same document. And this court should not allow that document to stand at all. And the conflicting figures, and those conflicting figures for valid votes cast of 14,213,137,000, and the other one is the one when you add the values of the individual candidates, the 4 candidates, you get 14,213,027, is evidence that the results were worked backwards to achieve a desired or predetermined outcome. Therefore, the declared percentages for the 4 candidates, no, the votes attributed to the 4 candidates and the declared, and the percentages attributed to them is all fiction. Now, I got to address the question of whether you can achieve, assuming that what in the totality of the announcements made by the chairman, any of the candidates realized 50% plus 1 vote.
Just checking on the time.
Yes. There's no display for the time, unfortunately.
According to mine, time is over. If you could just finish your slides.
Okay, thank you.
Because they seem to have lost theirs.
Okay, so a further analysis of Form 34C on voter turnout, the chairman announced and that issue has not been retracted at the close of voting. He was answering a particular question, and a journalist asked him, as matters stand now, what is the national voter turnout? And he said, oh, that one, I can deal with it. And he said, as at the time he was announcing, it was 65.4%. And according to what the KIMS kits had reported. And he expected that value to go up when all the KIMS kits had reported and the manual had been included in it. So when you calculate that against the total voter register, the national voter register of 22,120,458 votes, you get that the voter turnout as at that time was 14,466,799 votes. The next slide. So from Form 34, the tallies are ascribed in Form 34. You get, when you factor in the rejected votes, you get a total value of 14,000,000.